And I think that it's really a testimony to the START program and to the families in using the START model, how effective it can be.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, guys. I know you have impacted a lot of people since 2017. We're going on 4 years now that you guys have been doing this work. And I know personally a lot of those families now that have been really impacted by what you've done. So thank you. What are some of the challenges to implementing START in Colorado in particular?
Just again, from my perspective, having a small team, having one coordinator is very challenging. Limited resources and the scope of services are very limited because I'm doing it within just a small area of Larimer County. And so you're not able to reach as many people that are in the need for crisis intervention and those supports. And for me, it was really hard to see when improvement wasn't seen right away. And then I have to think about that change isn't linear. It's not going to happen just the way in which you think it's going to happen. It happens ebb and flow. And I think that's okay because you still see the positive outcomes and you see the increase in understanding. You see the increase in knowledge of working with a person with IDD and mental health behavioral challenges. So even though there are challenges within that, there are still the positives that you can see when you see that growth and when you see a family feeling like they can have that sense of relief. It is a great feeling to know that you were part of that change.
Right. And it's interesting because what you're describing is systems change. That long-term view is pretty amazing when you have a minute to look back and go, wow, look how far we've come.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. Sharon, did you have any?
Well, just to add on a little bit about, I think the facilitation of the multiple systems, which is so critical to the START process and to optimizing results for individuals, it can be definitely challenging, particularly when you haven't had organizations or types of services really interact in the past. So you really, again, as you all have been talking about, have begun to bring those groups together is a new process. And at that sort of more administrative or program level, developing those linkages is a challenge. And I think that once you get particularly your DD and your mental health people communicating and talking, then you tend to have a core that will expand to bring in other community pieces. But I would definitely say that is unique and sometimes can be a struggle, and you have to take it step at a time. And sometimes showing some progress for individuals who are engaged in START can be really helpful to growing the program both up as well as across.
So do either or both of you have any sort of parting words of wisdom to those agencies, the people who are considering developing a START program now?
I think just really to reiterate the values and the mission of what START is wanting to accomplish, and that is to build capacity, provide that sense of oxygen for families or that sense of help and hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for your time and all your insight today.
Thank you, Karen.
So, hello, Melanie, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Can you tell me your whole name, Melanie Hecker, but also, so who are you? What do you do?
So, my name is Melanie Hecker. I'm currently working as a research and training assistant for Center for START Services, but I've been doing various projects for Center for START Services over the past 10 years, such as presenting at conferences, helping with focus groups, and being a co-principal investigator on the WITH Foundation project for building a holistic best practices guide for medication prescribers. I am a recent graduate of the Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy's Master of Public Administration program here in Albany, New York, with a double concentration in policy analytic methods and not-for-profit management. I also received my bachelor's degree in public policy and management from the Rockefeller College as part of the dual BA-MPA program. And I have an associate's degree in human services from Hudson Valley Community College. Before working for Center for START Services, I also worked at Youth Power, which is New York State's statewide network of young people with disabilities or experience in state systems. And I have interned for Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley, Disability Rights New York, and the New York State Council on Children and Families. And I am a lifelong resident of Albany, New York.
That's quite a long history. And I have to say, on behalf of the Center for START Services, we feel lucky that you have agreed to work with us now that you're all done with school. So thank you. Thank you. Can you give us an overview of your experiences in the IDDMH service systems?
Yes. So I was diagnosed as autistic at age 6 and diagnosed with bipolar disorder at age 13. For my entire life, preschool through grad school, I have received special education services. In grade school, this was a wide range of things, from a one-on-one aid to extra time on tests to all sorts of specialized services. When I graduated high school and went to college, I started receiving supported education services. And in late high school through early college, I was in a school to work transition program for people with disabilities. I also have belonged to recreation and social programming for people on the autism spectrum. I am on the waiting list for a supported apartment for developmentally disabled people. And on the mental health side of things, I have lifelong involvement with the mental health system, including therapy and psychiatry services. And when I was a child, a few inpatient hospital stays.
Okay. That's extensive. A lot about both service systems, not only from personal experience, but through your schooling and your career choices, what you've chosen to do. So great. So in your opinion, what makes a good service provider? Like, what are the values or characteristics of a good service provider?
First of all, a good service provider needs to understand the intersections between developmental disabilities and mental health challenges, and needs to fully understand both, because the vast majority of people with developmental disabilities also have mental health challenges. But equally as important is a direct service provider needs to have the mindset of what I call the coach model, as opposed to what I call the jailer model or the police officer model. And this is actually a concept that I developed myself based on my personal experiences, the experiences of my peers, and my studies. So think of what a jailer does. A jailer's job is to keep people in line, make sure they're behaving, and punish them for infractions, but not much else. And this is the mindset that a lot of service providers unfortunately have, but it's the wrong mindset. The right mindset is to be a coach, to see your consumer as a whole person with their strengths along with their challenges, to know the underlying reasons behind the way why they act or feel, and to take those reasons into account when serving them, and to have the goal of helping the person be the best person they can be, as opposed to just keeping them in line or making sure they don't misbehave. And a final aspect of a good service provider is to encourage self-advocacy, to encourage their consumer to speak up if there's something they need or if there's something that they want to be changed. And overall, to care about the consumer and how they feel and their emotions and interests.
I love that metaphor of the jailer versus the coach. I think that's so insightful and really brings it home. It really does characterize sort of traditional service systems versus humanistic values that we really want to promote in all the service systems. I think that's a really cool analogy.
And it's all my own. I came up with this myself.
I love it. You should write it. Write about it too. Yeah, are you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I shouldn't be surprised. Yeah, but that's really good. So what do people who use services wish that providers knew or did better other than being coaches as opposed to jailers? Are there other specific things that maybe agencies as a whole or even just individual practices that you think should be implemented?
Yes. Well, first of all, people with disabilities are more than just our disabilities. And not everything a person with a disability experiences or displays is necessarily connected to their disability. And it's wrong to assume that it is. And to give you an example, there was one conference that I was keynoting at, and I went to one of the breakouts afterward. And we were given the profile of this young man with intellectual disabilities who was a high school student who was about to graduate. And we were given a profile of him, including a very lengthy medication list. And we were told that he's been acting very agitated lately, so what should we do? The other people at the conference, they went straight to the medication list. And they talked about adding something or taking something away or changing something for another. And then I said, why don't you try just asking him what the problem is? He's a high schooler. It could be that he's frustrated with an assignment. It could be a crush. It could be that he's nervous about graduating. You don't know that this is necessarily all about his disability. And they thought that was brilliant, but I thought it was common sense. Another thing that I need to emphasize is to encourage self-advocacy, as I said earlier, to train consumers in self-advocacy. Even if you think it might not stick, do it anyway. There's no harm in it. And I see a lot of agencies that are very good on promoting self-advocacy, but I also see a lot that discourage it or treat it as misbehavior or getting out of line. And a person is never misbehaving for pointing out something that they need or want. And one more very important thing is that adults with disabilities over the age of 18 or 21 or however you want to define it are adults. The fact that they have disabilities doesn't mean that they're permanent children. They're still adults and they still deserve to be treated like adults.
Thank you. Yes.
One more thing is that the person with the disability is the person who knows themselves best. So they're the ones that should be leading any conversation or direction in their services. And when you want to know something about disability, the best people to ask are people with disabilities ourselves, because trust me, we are happy to tell you.
Excellent. Yes, thank you for that. And Melanie, I think all of what you said was just so perfectly stated, but one thing stood out. You said you really have to help people, push them to be advocates, right? Teach people, train people, encourage them to be self-advocates. And I think that's like we're trying to fix maybe some of the stuff that a lot of people were taught about compliance when they're younger, and that compliance is such a big deal. Like you said, this misbehavior stuff that some people call misbehavior, and just want people to comply with their expectations. And so I think that's really important to look at that dichotomy. It's not about compliance, non-compliance. It's about becoming who you are and actualizing your own independence and personality and putting that out there.
Yes, people with developmental disabilities, we are a very diverse bunch, both in terms of the nature of our disabilities themselves and in terms of our strengths and our interests and our goals and dreams. And channeling all of that is what is fundamentally important in IDD services.
I love that. And that's really a good takeaway for any of these providers who are considering starting a START program. You're implementing a START program because those are exactly the values of START: is humanity, independence, advocacy, people not just complying or not having a problem, but flourishing and achieving life goals. Perfect. Thank you so much for your input, Melanie. Is there anything else you'd like for people to know that you think?
To know that this work that you will be doing is such fundamentally important work, because you're going to be the one who's going to be enabling your consumers to live the best, fullest lives they possibly can, and to be as connected with their communities and their fullest self as possible. That all won't be able to happen without you. We can't accomplish these things without a strong PCA workforce.
Thank you so much. That is the perfect note to end on. Fabulously inspiring. Thank you so much, Melanie.
Thank you.
Well, welcome back to the live portion and the question and answer portion. I just really loved and am moved by everything that Melanie said. I was when I first interviewed her, and just watching that again was really wonderful for me to hear. Hope you guys enjoyed her too. I did get a few comments about that. But now we are opening up the floor to any kinds of questions about the START model, in particular about the implementation, the RFP in Denver. Any questions you guys have, you can put them in the chat, or if you'd prefer to unmute yourselves and ask that question, you can do that too. Do we do that good of telling you every possible thing that may come up?
Hi, Karen. This is Corey
Hi, Corey.
Rosenberg. And in reading through the RFP, it talked about uh, billing for services and maintaining documentation. And I wondered whether that concept of billing was applying to the actual team members that are funded on the as part of the team itself. So is there an expectation that if something that they're providing would otherwise be a billable service, that those get billed? And
I'm going to ask Crystal to answer that so that I don't misspeak.
okay.
I'm not understanding it clearly.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, I'm Crystal. I am the Ideas Program Manager for Denver Human Services. We are the ones that put out the RFP. And so, Corey, I think what that section of the RFP is alluding to is the idea that certainly there are going to be services that could be billed and should be billed through Medicaid and other standard provisions, but the contract is going to be built in a way so that it's clear which services could be billed for START and which ones that START coordinators could be supporting, but would actually maybe be billed through other services. So we would work out those details with the provider to be selected. And we want to, when we do that, we want to make sure that it's a very clear and clean process. And we'll be looking to Karen and Joni and other members of the START team to give advice on how in other states they may have braided together various funding streams to ensure the best support for people on the receiving end. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I guess the worry I would have, especially in the early days of the program, would be if it was necessary to get approval for a service before it could be provided, that could unduly delay the operation of the START team.
Thank you for clarifying your comment and your concern. So our funding is very flexible in that way. And so it would just come down to ensuring that we've written our contract in a way where we are not interested in delaying the start of a service for someone due to determining which funding stream or getting services established. I think the goal, you'll see kind of where the RFP talks about like long-term sustainability of the program.
Mm-hmm.
The things we talk about is some of those funding streams. So in the beginning, like we've budgeted in a way where we intend to support the startup of this program. So the goal is not to limit access.
Crystal, I think to start out with, it's a non-unit contract, Corey. So it's not by the service, it's a non-unit. So you would come up with a plan to develop and launch the program. And then what I had to do when I wrote my grant, and I'm wondering if this is how you would do it, Crystal, is at the bottom, you have to show if there are any places where you anticipate possible income coming from other billing sources that might offset that funding, but it's non-unit. So for example, if you did more counseling with an individual through START, the START program doesn't really pay for ongoing counseling. But if somebody on your team ends up doing counseling, I'm just making this up to make the point, then that would have to be billed out of another source. Am I getting that right, Crystal?
Yes, Joni, thanks for that. And actually, there is a question in the proposal narrative section under budget that talks about, I think it's the 4th section under proposal narrative in the RFP that talks about asking you to describe any other resources that are leveraged to support or sustain the development of the program. So absolutely. Thanks for jumping in, Joni.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. Other questions?
So I have a question. Can people put in the chat box if they are here because they're interested in submitting, just set a proposal, just to let us know how many people here are interested in submitting a proposal. So just enter in the chat box, yes, we're interested, or no, we're not. I'm just curious. Okay, so. So just a couple that are present. Okay. Well, that means that you have a very good chance. 3. Okay. This is an informational opportunity for me. Okay. Well, what do I need to do to show you that this is really something you should move forward with in pursuing to that person who wants it, that it's an informational opportunity? What other information are you looking for? How can we help? You don't want any help from us, Chris. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah, so it looks like I recognize this user. So they're in a similar function as we are, and they're interested in the model.
I got it.
Yep, they're doing some research here.
Okay, gotcha. Well, Lindsay asks a very good question. Shall I take a crack at it, Crystal? So Lindsay said, I'm not sure yet. That's good. Be skeptical. That's a very good strength. This is good information. However, I think I feel unclear on what it looks like. We are a mental health and behavior therapy agency, and I'm just trying to imagine the processes. So basically, START is a mental health program for people with IDD, with mental health service needs. So it's actually, in some ways, an easier lift for mental health providers than it is for IDD providers, although both certainly can do the work. And the idea is to have expertise embedded, consultation support, and 24-hour crisis intervention embedded on the team to help that team to build capacity in better understanding and addressing the needs of the person. So let's say you're a therapist and you're working with a residential provider, and a DD provider, and a work program provider, and you have an individual who doesn't seem to be benefiting from the services that you're providing, and or is really not flourishing. They're not getting better, and they're getting more services than they are getting a life, which we see a lot of, right? As Melanie described. The idea of the START team is we train them. It's a very comprehensive training model. So we train you in START strategies and in understanding diagnostic issues, positive psychology approaches, and also how to work with multiple systems, also cultural and linguistic competency, understanding that people have different cultural needs, and incorporating all of that into our methods, which walks you through what I showed you in the diagram. And then what happens is a person stays with you for on average around 15 months, and then the team takes over, and you kind of withdraw. So it's really a linkage team. For those of you who have seen wraparound, it's much more involved than wraparound in that there's very comprehensive training in START methods. And one of the reasons is methodology around IDDMH is really not that available in graduate school. Like if we say we need 6 social workers, it doesn't mean they'll know anything about what to do with the population. So they do need specific training on that. Does that help you, Lindsay? It's the best thing you'd ever do in your career. I'm just telling you, Lindsay.
No, it does help. And we're a specialty provider for clients with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we do mental health. So I mean, that's why this intrigued me. I'm just trying to fit the puzzle pieces together, I think, because it is unfamiliar to me.
Yeah. So one of the things we know with behavior therapy is it doesn't work for everyone, but it's the only thing that's been billable, you know, like honestly, and mental health clinics don't provide good outpatient psychotherapy, let's be honest. So what happens is people are restricted to approaches that don't necessarily work for them. So they end up on polypharmacy. So Lindsay, what your team will do is change that by
Right.
building capacity and learning about differences, and that there are multiple approaches to supporting someone, that for some people behavior therapy is effective, but for others it isn't. And that's okay, because there's other options, right? And for some people meds are helpful, for others it isn't, and there are other options. So that's sort of
One thing, Joni, can I interrupt and recommend that we'll put it in the chat, put in the link, but we have a film on the Center for, we have a few films, several films actually, on the Center for Start Services that actually go into programs and follow people who are receiving services and the team. So you can kind of get a better idea about what does it really look like in action. And we did that because it felt nebulous describing it, right? So that should help quite a bit if you take a look at that. There it is. Beth put it in there.
You can answer the question. Where's Luke? Is Luke here?
I'm
Luke
here.
Moore? Okay,
Yes.
so we have, oh, there you are. We have a sustainability committee that's national in scope. And one of the things that we'll be doing is working with the Denver program on sustainability long-term and what other states are doing. I can tell you as of today, it just happened. Pennsylvania got approved for MFP as a start being used for money follows the person. That is a big deal because CMS is now acknowledging that paying for START through money follows the person is a legitimate billing use. And MFP is not unit billing, it's by the person. They have a budget. So I don't know if Colorado has money follows the person. Do they, Corey?
Yes. Mhm.
So MFP language can be modified for the state. One of the things that this is a demonstration project. And it's a 3-year demonstration project. So it's not 1 year, it's not 2 years, it's 3 years. So you should not be dropping the ball on people like we did with the other project that the state sort of half funded and half didn't with the, and I don't even want to get into that, but this is a fully funded 3-year project. So you should be able to serve a significant number of people in Denver and make a difference. The other thing, Lindsay, is your clinic. Let's say you're the provider and you get awarded this. Your staff can remain START coordinators without having a START team and continue to be part of the START network and continue to use your skills in whatever it is that you do going forward. So Sharon, who I was going to say testified, Sharon, who spoke earlier, Sharon Jaxie, her practice has changed because she learned how to do this. And we're part of a national network. And in some places, programs fold, but the START coordination remains. Like people still use the skills, still, use the methods. So Denver is investing in capacity building in addition to investing in this one program, if that makes any sense. So there's no way to lose by doing something like this.
I think
I feel-
Crystal wanted to say something. Yeah.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Thanks, Karen and Joni. I just wanted to add that we put that language in the RFP, not because we can't see the future. We don't know. The goal is to see how things go the first 3 years, to understand the resources available, and to see the outcomes that are happening in our community and then make decisions accordingly. And so we're not saying that we would just be cutting funding off that exact day at the end of that 3-year contract. We're not saying that funding is going to be available. We're very interested in ensuring that the things that we're pursuing with our funds and with our program have long-lasting impact in Denver, which I think was the point that Joni made as well, that there's no losing here. But that said, we're simply putting it out there that the goal is not for the program to be solely reliant on local funding, but that doesn't mean local funding is going to just disappear overnight.
This is Corey again. I have another question. It talked about the population to be served would be Denver County, but then it talked about outreach in the metro area, and I wasn't sure what was intended there.
I can speak to that. So our program, because we are local Denver funds, we have pretty specific criteria about what happens in providing direct services to clients that are Denver residents and therefore eligible. And there's a lot of information about that on our website. That said, just because you live in Denver doesn't mean you're not stepping across county line to go to a hospital that's closer to you, down the street from you, that just happens to be in another county. So we recognize that in our interest of building a capacity in our systems that will support our residents where they are, we're not drawing hard lines on, you know, are we working with Denver Police Department or Aurora Police Department? Are we working with Denver Mental Health Center for Denver? Are we working for Aurora Mental Health? Like, our clients may be, our residents may be accessing services at a variety of places, and we want to kind of preserve their ability to choose what works best for them.
Great, thank you.
Great questions.
Yeah, I was just looking. I don't see, unless I missed it, I don't see another one, but these are good. Oh.
So I want to just share one thing, because I think sometimes a project like this can be very, it can feel very complex. It's actually very simple. So if you spoke to any of us who do the work and you listen to our attitude, or even listening to Melanie's description, it's really very intuitive. Our focus is humanistic psychology. So if you were to, so Lindsay, for a clinic like yours, that doesn't really do a lot of humanistic psychology necessarily, it would add more depth of knowledge to what you're doing with the IDD population. So all of these little clues that we gave you, if you look up humanistic psychology, you will see the origins. Remember that guy, Carl Rogers, who used to do the reflective listening in that movie? Yeah, that's humanistic psychology. Or Carl Beck, those are the origins, which really focus on the fact that, yes, you can have vulnerabilities, but really balancing that out with a biopsychosocial, a whole person approach to people, and always emphasizing what they're capable of in addition to what is challenging to them, is extremely important in the work and moves people forward. And that's really what this is about.
I did want to add one thing, and I think, Joni, you could probably speak to it better than I could, because this was something you said to me when we were meeting recently about the model. But that it's not necessarily about eliminating crisis from life, but about building in capacity to and resiliency to being in crisis, and having the tools and the supports needed, and a supportive community around you that can be there and rise to the occasion and ensure you have what you need to be successful. And so Joni, I'd love it if you had a little bit more to add to that, because I'm not sure if I fully captured your comment.
So I've been reading a lot, and I'm not going to hold up the book, Beth, like I've been doing in every meeting that I go to. But there's a whole concept around trauma. So 85–90% of the people that are referred to START programs are at high risk and have experienced difficulty. And they've mostly, all of them have suffered from trauma. It's very high rate, and also have expressed themselves through aggression. Those are the sort of two top things that we see. So they've been victims, and they've also expressed themselves in ways that can be somewhat scary and intimidating to people. And one of the things that we work very hard on is building resilience within the person. And the concept of resilience in overcoming trauma is familiar to a lot of mental health providers. But I think the part that has been really resonated for me in my most recent reading is that the START team's role is to be an external source of resilience. So, providing hope and oxygen during times of difficulty, really accepting that people do have difficulty. Sometimes they lose track of their own resilience, but we're here to remind them that we're here to promote their resilience. So that resilience comes from both inside of the person that you try to promote through your therapeutic strategies, but also the START team works in collaboration with the team so that they're a source of external resilience and hope for both the person and each other and the family, et cetera. So that framework has really helped us to be very successful in our work.
Right. And I'll add to it, Crystal, when you said it's not necessarily that nobody will ever have a mental health crisis again, right? So somebody may have chronic mental health problems that will occasionally recur, right? Well, we definitely want to decrease the incidence of that, right? And the intensity of it. But really, like you said, Crystal, we're really working so that the entire system doesn't go into crisis with the person, because that's typically who is referred to us. It's not just the person in crisis, but everyone around them. Nobody knows what to do. They're burnt out, they're fatigued, they've tried everything they know. So we come in to help build that resilience so that they can weather those storms, and everybody knows what everybody else is going to do, and we're a well-oiled machine, and it doesn't throw everything off. We can kind of get through it and keep going forward, instead of what we tend to see by the time people are referred to START is they've had so many multiple crises and nobody has been successful at preventing the next one, right? That what tends to happen is things get taken away from the person. More and more of their life gets peeled away. You can no longer go to day program, or you lost your job. You've lost a residential placement, or your family isn't sure how to support you anymore, right? The life gets smaller, and we focus on building that life so that you do have the strength to move forward and build perma, right? So it's strategic. It sounds a little fluffy, but we do it in a very strategic way.
It is not a cause or cure approach. It is to help people deal with the inevitable stressors in life. And that relieves a lot of people the tension of knowing they can't ever make mistakes, they can't ever be wrong, they can never have difficulty. But our big target is we do not think people should need police involvement. We do not think they need to go to the emergency room. And we do not think often, sometimes they do, but rarely do they need to go to the hospital. And so the strategy of your START team will be to come up with ways to help build capacity within that person's life so that when they're having difficulty, those are not the remedies. And that's really a big part of our focus.
Thank you, Joni and Karen, for speaking to that. That was exactly what I was looking for.
I feel like asking people in chat, let us know if you're frightened. People won't go on camera. They're not talking to us.
Hi, Joni, it's Louisa. I chose to go on camera. Hello. I just wanted to add just to build upon what Joni just said. One of the things when I was running the earlier Colorado pilot that I explained to people was we don't, you know, we don't believe there's never going to be another crisis. In fact, we know there will, because you know, a population of people who struggle with a developmental disability and a co-occurring behavioral health diagnoses are going to have crises. But the you know, one of the main goals in better training people and giving people the tools that they need, both the folks, the coordinators, and then downstream, the families and the individual, is to reduce the acuity of the events when they do occur, the acuity and the occurrence rate of the events. And to understand, one of the examples I give, to understand that we know that it's hard to be a teenager. And we know that it's hard to be a teenager if you don't have an intellectual and developmental disability with a co-occurring behavioral health diagnosis. So add that together, and we've seen that families who seem to be able to manage, like, you know, not manage well, but manage, really things start getting really tough when a child reaches age 11, 12, 13. And knowing this, how can our coordinators, STAR coordinators, help support that family so that the end result isn't, this child needs to be placed elsewhere and can't be in the home anymore. So it really, and we've seen that, and, you know, Rini was on the phone earlier. She's seen that firsthand. And Laura out in Mesa County saw it. So it's an incredibly effective program. I would just like to put my 2 cents in for that.
Thank you. So we're over time, which is cool. You guys were so slow and now you're talking.
And there are some questions in the chat too.
Okay, so
I
let's
think
go.
for Crystal, but there are two from Cordelia and Lindsay.
Let's go with Lynette first.
Hi, Joni. One of my questions is we are doing right now similar to this, and have had a couple of our clinicians start trained and gone through your training. And we also have a contract with MHCD here in Denver, where we're doing it at a smaller type basis. That's why I was interested in listening, because the RFP takes it to a whole nother level. And we are right now contracting for a PhD psychologist to help us with assessments. We're also doing a MOU with MHCD as far as their short-term stabilization to provide some for our individuals. And so why I'm here is just to hear how this could help the program that we already got going, and maybe even expand it. So I appreciate you explaining some of this. And I believe through the RFP that you guys would be continuing to assist that organization throughout this whole process. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Us? Oh, yes,
Yeah.
we're there for three lovely years.
Okay.
So we are, yes, we will be side by side with the program. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And the STAR coordination training and other things that we've done in Colorado was always a bit of a compromise based on the resources that were available. It was not the full START model, and it never really, although learning always helps, it's not the full enchilada.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this
right.
is really exciting because it will really demonstrate, we're talking about hundreds of people being served, you know, and really having an impact in Denver that will be quite noticeable. But thank you. And so let's go to the questions. Stacy, you found a couple of questions.
Yes, there's one from Cordelia. She wants to know, can families, individuals, I guess family/individuals self-refer in any of the existing programs? And then there's one more for Crystal from Lindsay.
So in the ordinary normal, in most START programs, families can self-refer, but it has to be approved by the funder. So they can certainly ask for support, and then the funder has to approve that they're eligible for those services through their funding. So but yes, absolutely, families can be the first point of contact, and then the START team would contact the funding source. And if they cannot be served by START, it is the START team's job to link with enough resources that that family is not just told no, that they have the opportunity to get help from someone. So that's a very important part of the job.
Oh, I think there was a question about information on how success is measured for outcome tracking.
Yes, for Crystal, Lindsay wanted to know, can you offer more information on how success is measured for outcome tracking?
So what I can tell you, Lindsay, and I think this actually might be one I do lob over to Karen and Joni as well, because they're going to be, we want to use the measures that START uses to gauge success. That said, we are very interested in seeing the impact in our community. And so those will be conversations that we would have with the selected provider. What you see in the RFP right now is questions about how you've traditionally measured success and evaluated outcomes so that we can get a better understanding of your process and how that might align. And so Karen and Joni, is there anything you want to add about measuring success? I mean, I do know, like, we want to see improved outcomes. We want to see reduced visits to the hospital or reduced police engagement. We want to see, folks on the right meds instead of just a bevy of medications. And I think that that's just kind of a broad overview of what Denver's expectations might be in that realm. But it really is person specific. So Joni and Karen, will you talk more about that?
We have a database called SIRS, START Information Reporting System, and you would sign an agreement and enter your de-identified. So we don't identify the names, they're given SIRS numbers. And we measure not only what happens to the person, but what services you are provided. We measure what STAR coordinators are doing, how much time everything takes. There's a lot of, Anne-Marie, can you mute that person? We measure just about, it's a big data dictionary, and you will be getting weekly updates on your data entry to ensure that if your program is not entering data in an active way, if your STAR coordinators are missing it, you'll know, because we'll tell you. And then you get quarterly reports, and Denver will be getting quarterly reports. We're very data driven. We will also compare what happens in Denver to the other 25 locations that start around the country. So you'll know, do we have to do things a little bit different in Denver? Are things, are the outcomes not what we expected? I'll give you an example. When we first went into one of our regional centers, had a very high rate of suicidal ideation in the population that we had never seen before. So Karen, do you want to talk about what you did for follow-up with that?
Yes, so that was identified in one region as intake as a reason for referral. Really high for children in particular. So we have connected with local community mental health centers and hospitals and developed a suicide prevention sort of task force there to do more training and outreach. And to learn more what that is about, right? Where is that coming from, and why is that? We don't have any solid answers for you yet, as far as concrete data about that yet, but we have developed a group that is looking into that and addressing it across the system.
So that's just sort of an example of what the data, so we use the data not in a punitive way to say, oh my God, you're doing a horrible job, but more like, this is what is happening in the field. This is what we're learning about people. This is what people are getting. This is how they're benefiting or not benefiting. It will also, it's a pilot. So we need to do things like go back to Crystal and say, in Denver, your average caseload size should be X or Y, because this is what we see the demand on STAR coordination is. because every state and every location, every city and town, case managers, there are some places where case managers and service coordinators are very active, and there are some places where they have massive caseload sizes and they're not as active a partner as they might be in other locations, which means it's more time for the STAR coordinator. Does that make sense? So we don't know. So we'll learn from the data, and we'll keep measuring it over and over again.
The final thing I wanted to add about measuring success is just, I think both, START and DHS will just be interested to see the provider show progress in learning the model, implementing the model, getting folks enrolled into services with their START team, and kind of just following the progress for program certification. So that'll be kind of a more broad, not direct impact to the clients, but kind of a broader goal that does then go back to resources available to the clients through the success of implementation.
And we should probably end here because we're way over. This was great. How can people ask further questions, Crystal and Stacy?
Go ahead, Stace.
Everybody, there's information on the RFP. There's a deadline with regard to when you can submit questions. Once that deadline has passed, I can then pull all of those questions. So go ahead and submit at any time up until that date. And the only thing I would say is that also any questions that came up today, along with any additional questions that get submitted, will all be posted in one Q&A document with everything compiled after, and I'm sorry, I didn't have the RFP open, but they will all be posted together in one comprehensive document so that if you don't remember a question or answer that was given, anybody can go back and look at those before applying.
And see, the Center for START Services is not allowed to answer your direct questions, but what you can do is ask questions of Crystal and Stacy, and they can ask us clarifying questions about the START model, should you have them, and they just need to make sure that those answers are available to all bidders.
We also recommend you visit our website.
Very important.
You will learn a lot if you dig into that.
It's like a quiz with all the answers on the website. So just like, I don't know, I teach graduate students, they don't read the damn stuff. I tell them what the answers are. I don't understand it.
I was also going to add, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Anne-Marie or Karen or Joni, that if you've registered for this and you were here live today, you'll still have access to the recording. And so if you want to go back and reference any points of the presentation today, I believe that will be available to you.
Thank you, and hooray.
Just so you all know, so the deadline will be April 2nd at 3:30 p.m., which is Denver time. So just make sure I learned a little bit about Mountain Daylight Time recently, being an Arizona native. So just pay attention to that. And then we will post our responses the afternoon of April 7th. There is a time deadline listed in the RFP, just to give you an idea.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you all very much. Hooray.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Oh, and it's fun.
It is really fun. We're fun.
Yeah, I don't know if we said that. We're the best. So this is going to be a great project for whoever lands it.
Come on. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Happy Friday.
Hey there, Andrea. Oh, you're muted.